Welcome to English Story Hub, where extraordinary tales come alive through the power of storytelling. I'm Thomas, your host and guide on this literary journey. Each episode we'll explore captivating stories that transport you to new worlds, introduce you to unforgettable characters, and ignite your imagination. From classic literature to contemporary fiction, from heartwarming tales to thrilling adventures, today we will dive into the fascinating life of one of the most famous men in history, Napoleon Bonaparte. His story is filled with ambition, power, glory, and finally, downfall. It is a story of a young boy from a small island who became Emperor of France. It is also the story of how dreams of greatness can lift a man high, but also bring him crashing down. So, let us begin. Early life in Corsica. Napoleon was born in 1769 on the island of Corsica, which had recently become part of France. His family was not rich, but they were part of the lower nobility. Napoleon's father worked as a lawyer, and his mother, Letizia, was strong and strict. As a child, Napoleon was different from the other boys. He was serious, quiet, and he loved to read. He especially enjoyed books about history, about great leaders like Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. At the age of 9, Napoleon left Corsica and went to school in France. There he learned the French language, though at first he spoke it with a strong Corsican accent. Other children sometimes laughed at him, but Napoleon did not care. He focused on his studies, especially mathematics, geography, and military history. A young soldier. When he was just 16 years old, Napoleon finished military school and became an officer in the French army. He was young, but he was clever and hard-working. He spent hours reading about battles and strategies. In 1789, the French Revolution began. The King of France, Louis XVI, lost his power, and the people demanded change. The old order collapsed, and the country was in chaos. For a young soldier like Napoleon, this was both dangerous and full of opportunity. He quickly showed his talent as a leader. At the age of 24, he defended the French government from rebels in Paris by using cannons. His quick thinking saved the day, and people began to notice him. Rise to fame. The Italian campaign. In 1796, Napoleon was given command of the French army in Italy. Their soldiers were poor, hungry, and tired. But Napoleon gave them hope. He spoke to them with passion. "Soldiers, you are hungry and naked. The government owes you much, but can give you nothing. I will lead you into the most fertile plains in the world. There you will find honor, glory, and riches." The soldiers believed him, and together they won victory after victory against Austria and its allies. In just 1 year, Napoleon became a hero of France. Love and marriage. During this time, Napoleon married Josephine de Beauharnais, a beautiful widow. Napoleon loved her deeply, though Josephine was not always faithful. Still, their marriage helped Napoleon rise in society. The Egyptian Adventure. In 1798, Napoleon set out on a new adventure, to Egypt. He wanted to weaken Britain by cutting off its trade routes to India. He brought not only soldiers, but also scientists, engineers, and artists. Though the campaign was difficult and ended in failure, it left an important mark. It was during this expedition that the famous Rosetta Stone was discovered, which later helped scholars unlock the secrets of ancient Egyptian writing. Napoleon takes power. By 1799, France was once again in political crisis. The government was weak, and people were tired of corruption. Napoleon returned to Paris and seized power in a coup d'etat. He became first consul, the leader of France. Within a few years, he crowned himself Emperor of the French in 1804. It was an extraordinary rise, from a poor boy on Corsica to the ruler of one of the greatest nations in Europe. Reforms and achievements as emperor, Napoleon was not only a warrior, but also a reformer. He created the Napoleonic Code, a new system of laws that influenced many countries around the world. He improved education, built new roads and bridges, and made government more efficient. Many ordinary people admired him because he brought order and stability after years of revolution. Master of Europe. Napoleon was a brilliant general. Between 1805 and 1809, he won a series of battles that made France the strongest power in Europe. At Austerlitz in 1805, he defeated the combined armies of Austria and Russia in one of the greatest victories in history. Soon, much of Europe was under his control. Only Britain remained free from his grasp. The fall begins. The Spanish War. But power brought problems. In Spain, Napoleon faced a new kind of war. Spanish fighters supported by Britain used guerrilla tactics, quick, surprise attacks instead of big battles. This war drained French strength and morale, the Russian disaster. In 1812, Napoleon made his biggest mistake. He invaded Russia with an army of over 600,000 men. At first, it seemed he might succeed, but the Russians retreated deep into their land, burning villages and crops as they went. When winter came, Napoleon's army was trapped without food or shelter. The freezing cold and hunger killed hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Only a small part of the army survived the long march back. This disaster weakened Napoleon greatly. The defeat and exile. By 1814, the tide had turned decisively against Napoleon Bonaparte. The devastating Russian campaign had claimed over 400,000 men from his Grande Armée, and the coalition armies converged on Paris from all directions. The Battle of Leipzig in 1813, the Battle of the Nations, dealt a crushing blow with over 600,000 men clashing in this epic confrontation. When Paris fell on March 31, 1814, Napoleon found himself isolated and bereft of options. On April 6, 1814, at the Palace of Fontainebleau, Napoleon faced bitter reality. His generals, led by Marshal Ney, once called the bravest of the brave, informed him the army would no longer follow. With tears in his eyes, Napoleon signed his abdication. The Treaty of Fontainebleau granted Napoleon sovereignty over tiny Elba, a mere 86 square miles compared to his former empire stretching from Spain to Poland. On April 20th, in profound melancholy, Napoleon bid farewell to his old guard. "Goodbye, my children," he declared, his voice breaking. "I would like to press you all to my heart." But Napoleon was not finished. Even in exile on Elba, his restless mind churned with plans for return, while his network of spies kept him informed of growing discontent in France under the restored Bourbon monarchy. The 100 Days. On February 26, 1815, under cover of darkness, Napoleon executed one of history's most audacious escapes. With just over 1,000 loyal followers, he slipped past British naval patrols and set sail from Elba. 3 days later, Napoleon's small force landed near Antibes. "The eagle with the national colors will fly from steeple to steeple all the way to Notre Dame," he declared, beginning the remarkable flight of the eagle, a 20-day march to Paris that would decide Europe's fate. The crucial test came at Laffrey, near Grenoble. A battalion blocked Napoleon's path with fixed bayonets. In one of history's most dramatic confrontations, Napoleon walked alone toward the bristling weapons, opening his gray overcoat to expose his chest. "Soldiers of the 5th, you recognize me. If there is one among you who wants to kill his emperor, here I am." The silence stretched before a single voice cried. The entire battalion threw down their weapons to embrace their former commander. At Lyon, Marshal Ney, who had pledged to bring Napoleon back in an iron cage, found himself face to face with his former commander. After an emotional meeting, Ney emerged to announce his renewed loyalty. "The cause of the Bourbons is lost forever," he declared. As Napoleon approached Paris, his army grew by thousands each day. On March 20th, exactly 100 days before his final defeat, Napoleon entered Paris in triumph, while King Louis XVI fled during the night. But Europe's leaders were determined to stop him forever. The Seventh Coalition was born, united in their determination to end the Napoleonic threat once and for all. Napoleon knew he had to act swiftly. On June 12, 1815, he crossed into Belgium with 128,000 men, the last army he would ever command. His plan: drive a wedge between Wellington's Anglo-Dutch forces and Blücher's Prussians. Then came June 18, 1815, Waterloo. At this small Belgian village, Napoleon faced Wellington and the Prussians in the battle that would determine Europe's fate. For hours, the fighting raged with unprecedented ferocity. The Imperial Guard, Napoleon's elite veterans who had never been defeated, made their final charge. But it was not enough. The arrival of Blücher's Prussians turned the tide. As the Guard reeled back in defeat for the first time, the cry went up: "La Garde recule! The Guard retreats!" Within hours, Napoleon's last army was in full flight, and the man who had once ruled most of Europe was fleeing the field. Final exile and death. After Waterloo, Napoleon faced exile once more. But this time his captors were determined there would be no second escape. Seeking asylum with the British, Napoleon believed he was bound for England. Instead, he was informed at sea of his true destination, St. Helena, a volcanic island 1,200 miles from the nearest land. On October 15, 1815, Napoleon arrived at his final prison. His new home was Longwood House, a damp, rat-infested wooden building originally constructed as a cowshed. "What a horrible residence!" Napoleon exclaimed. "They have lodged me above the clouds." The conditions were deliberately harsh, orchestrated by Governor Sir Hudson Lowe. Napoleon was confined to a 12-square-mile area, his correspondence censored, his movements constantly monitored. He spent his days dictating memoirs to his faithful followers, pacing as he relived his campaigns. "What a novel my life has been!" he often exclaimed. The physical conditions took a severe toll. The house was poorly ventilated, walls wept with moisture, and mold grew everywhere. Napoleon's famous gray overcoat began to show green patches of mildew, a poignant symbol of his deteriorating circumstances. As years passed, Napoleon's health declined precipitously. The man who had once reviewed troops for hours now tired easily during short walks. He complained of stomach pains, nausea, and swelling legs. His complexion took on a yellowish pallor that alarmed his companions. The isolation was perhaps most difficult. Napoleon, who had thrived on the company of thousands, was now reduced to a handful of companions on a remote island. He alternated between periods of activity and deep depression, sometimes spending entire days in bed. As 1821 dawned, it became clear Napoleon's time was running out. On May 3rd, during a violent tropical storm, he suffered a severe crisis. On May 5th, 1821, at 5:49 in the evening, Napoleon Bonaparte drew his last breath. He was just 51 years old. His final words were France, l'armée, tête d'armée, Joséphine. Outside, the tropical wind howled across the desolate plateau, as if nature itself mourned the passing of one of history's most extraordinary figures.
More than 2 centuries after his death, Napoleon Bonaparte remains one of history's most influential figures, reaching into law, government, education, and society itself. Napoleon's most enduring contribution is the Napoleonic Code, promulgated in 1804. This revolutionary legal framework established that all citizens are equal before the law, regardless of birth or social station. "My true glory," Napoleon declared, "is not to have won 40 battles. Waterloo will erase the memory of so many victories, but what nothing will destroy, what will live eternally, is my civil code." The code abolished feudalism, established property rights, and guaranteed religious freedom. Today, legal systems based on the Napoleonic Code govern over 150 jurisdictions worldwide, from France and Germany to Japan and much of Latin America. Napoleon's administrative reforms were equally revolutionary. He created merit-based bureaucracy, standardized weights and measures with the metric system, and established modern public education that became a worldwide model.
In military affairs, Napoleon revolutionized warfare. His combined arms tactics became the foundation of modern military doctrine. His promotion of officers based on merit created modern military professionalism. Every soldier carries a marshal's baton in his knapsack, he famously declared. Yet Napoleon's legacy remains controversial. His wars cost millions of lives. Estimates place European casualties at over 3.5 million. His reintroduction of slavery in French colonies remains a dark stain. Whether viewed as hero or villain, Napoleon transformed not just his age, but all ages that followed. In showing how merit could triumph over birth and new ideas reshape ancient institutions, Napoleon became the first truly modern man. Perhaps the last great individual to single-handedly alter the course of human history. Closing words. So that was the extraordinary story of Napoleon Bonaparte, the meteoric rise and dramatic fall of one of history's most complex and influential figures. From a minor Corsican nobleman's son to Emperor of the French, his life reads like the greatest novel ever written. Except every word is true. We've traced his journey from revolutionary battlefields to the glittering halls of power, from the frozen wastes of Russia to the remote Atlantic island where he drew his final breath. We've seen how a champion of revolutionary ideals transformed into an emperor, yet never entirely abandoned his belief in merit over birth. Napoleon's story is ultimately very human. Extraordinary talent married to boundless ambition. Brilliant success shadowed by catastrophic failure. He showed that a single individual could reshape Europe's map and influence human development for centuries, yet also demonstrated that even the mightiest emperor remains mortal. Perhaps this is why Napoleon's legacy remains so contested. He was not simply hero or villain, but something far more complex, a figure embodying all contradictions of the modern age. His influence permeates our world even now. When justice is dispensed equally regardless of class, we witness the Napoleonic Code's legacy. When merit trumps birth in careers, we benefit from principles he championed. Thank you for joining me on this remarkable journey through history here at English Story Hub. Napoleon's story reminds us that history is a living narrative of human struggle, ambition, triumph, and tragedy, teaching eternal lessons about power, responsibility, and the balance between individual greatness and collective welfare. Until our next historical adventure together, this is English Story Hub. In studying the past, we prepare to write the next chapter of the human story. See you in the next episode, where history comes alive once more.